Okay, we're live. Hello. It's Ariel Ellis, author of The Original Millennial, a thought leadership series featuring millennials who are leaders in business and community. We're super excited because this project is really growing and continuing to get more and more legs. So I'm excited about it, and so are our supporters. And I want to thank everybody who has already pre-ordered the book, already signed up to join the website, and been tweeting us and following. And it's just been a great conversation to have about the ways in which millennials are leading in community and business. And as you know, or you may not know, millennials are slated to make up 75% of leaders in the workforce by the year 2020. Initially, it was 2025, but the numbers are kind of now showing that we are consistently moving up the ladder. So in about 5 years, 5 to 10 years, probably closer to five, will be almost 75%, 75% of the of leaders in the workforce, and we'll make that up. And so that means that change, of course, as we know, is inevitable, and it's gonna definitely be something that we're leading, and we are already leading it, which is why this project is so important. But I'm not who you came to see. Joe Holberg is who you came to see. I'm going to tell you about this great guy. I'm so glad I found him, or he found me rather. He has a very interesting story, and I'm going to let him tell the majority of his story, but I wanted to introduce to you the work that he does. His company is Holberg Financial, and it's designed for you to be able to control your financial life and ultimately reach your dreams. His company is not like most big companies, although he is growing steadily. This company focuses on you as an individual, understands your values and your situation financially, puts you with someone who you can trust, who has been in your shoes before, and wants to really keep you informed and empowered about your finances. It's funny because he knows a little bit about finances, being someone who had to borrow $40 from a neighbor to pay for a college application. So he knows a lot and has gone several places throughout his career and his life that have shown him what to do, how to navigate his industry, and how to be an original millennial. Joe, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to contribute to the project and share a little bit about myself too.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your story. I didn't share all of your story for a reason, because I want you to share it with anyone who might be listening or watching. So tell us your story. Start when you had to borrow that $40 for your college application.
Yeah, so essentially, I was really excited to go to college, and I filled out the application. It was no big deal. And then I got to the very last page, and it was like, all right, now you have to pay for the application. And it was something I didn't see coming. And so I went over and asked my parents. I was like, hey, can I borrow $40? And they were like, well, we want to, but we don't have $40 for you. And I was like, okay, shoot, this is going to be really difficult. I know this is $40, and I'm pretty sure the cost of this education is like $40,000. So there was this big discrepancy, like challenge getting 40, not sure how I'm going to get the next 40,000. And so fortunately, my neighbor gave me some money and allowed me to get into college. And that was the beginning of this challenge to step into the working world, become one of the original millennials that we're talking about now, and sort of find my place. So with those challenges, I learned quite a bit, and ultimately I've had several different positions, but I thought it was a good idea to start to empower and inform millennials specifically around their finances, because another question I had was, when do we learn about money? And what I realized was we were never really taught about it. You don't go to a personal finance class in high school. You rarely get them in college. And then you're sort of cast out into the world, and it's like sort of figure this out on your own. And I just saw some of my friends who have MBAs, accounting degrees, psychology, whatever it is, they all had these questions about money. And so with my personal experience and my passion for it, I thought I would start a company. And so I did.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about what that was like, right? How you had to work through college, and when you got out, what was that like for you when you got out of college and thought about what your next steps were, and thinking about what kind of struggle you had, you
Yeah.
know? going through the process?
Yeah, so it was really interesting. My sophomore year, afterwards, I sort of like ran out of money, and I was just like, "Whoa, I can't do this anymore." So I contacted the financial aid department, and fortunately, I got a hold of the right person, and she just sort of flipped the switch and allowed me to finish out pretty much all grants from there. And it was a big revelation for me. I was like, "Wow, I just got a lot of help from the federal government," and I thought to myself, well, I was given something, so I might as well give back. So when I graduated from college, instead of going to Wall Street or being an investment banker, I was like, I'm going to do AmeriCorps. And so I went to the East Coast. I worked at a small nonprofit that did microfinance. And I taught business classes and helped people manage their personal finances, and did their taxes as well. These were low-income families and individuals. And it was a great way for me to sort of step into the social venture roles right out of college. And, I had to make a choice. It was like I could have made money, or I could have gone and helped people. And I just decided to go do that because I thought that I had been given a really great gift in the form of student grants and student loans. So that was the first step, in really diving down this path. And I kept realizing that there was more and more to do. So after that, I ended up doing Teach for America on the west side of Chicago, where I continued to teach. I taught math, and I realized, hey, if I'm going to teach adults on the East Coast, I might as well teach kids in Chicago about money. And so we had an artificial economy where we talked about how to have a job. They all had classroom jobs, and they just loved it. And they got fake money to buy time in the corner where they could read their own books, where they could buy a Pandora song and listen to that at the end of class. And so it was really motivating for them to see a real world connection between math, money, and things they cared about.
Wow, that's interesting. Talk a little bit more about the work that you experienced there and the work that you do now. Um, and then tell us if there are any parallels with that.
Yeah, I think it was crazy because when I started on the East Coast, I was teaching 30, 40, 50-year-old adults who oftentimes had families about how to start a business. And I was fresh out of college. I mean, I was 22, and I was sitting there and I was like, how can this be an issue? Like, I know I don't know a lot, but I still have something valuable to share. And now that I'm starting a company, that specifically works with millennials, most of whom have graduated from college. It's not a prerequisite, but I think a lot of times we sit there, especially as it regards to money. It's like, hey, if you're low income, you have this set of issues, and if you're not low income, you've got this set of issues. And what I realize, and here's the parallel, is we really have the same type of issues: financial security, financial stability, the need for persistent savings to fund retirement. I mean, these are issues that affect all Americans. And some of the stats are very telling. I mean, I saw one the other day that 68% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. That's clearly not a low income versus a middle versus a high income. That's something that we're all facing. And so when I think about it, it really comes down to information and education as a way to increase financial stability and security in the country.
Talk about your experience doing the Google page.
Yeah. So after Teach for America, along with teaching my kids about finance, I sat there as I was in my second year of teaching, and I thought to myself, these kids will eventually have jobs, and that led me to think, well, what kind of jobs exist in the 21st century? And a lot of them are now moving towards technology, computer programming, and computer science. And so I got a grant to get a bunch of Chromebooks, and I started to not only use it to teach math, but I decided that, hey, I would use a little bit of time to start to teach my kids how to code. And I didn't know how to code, but I figured it was something worth learning. So I taught myself a little coding. Then I started to teach them. And it turned out, right as I was finishing teaching, that Google was starting a program called CS First. It stands for Computer Science First. And essentially, we were trying to figure out a way to not only teach kids computer science, but we were trying to figure out a way to do that for underrepresented groups, specifically minorities, women, and low-income students. And we did that in South Carolina. And over the course of 2 years, we ended up taking that and scaling it across the country. And now it's a global program that's impacted over 100,000 students, and it continues to grow. And I think the important thing is to realize that kids that are now seeing it in fourth through eighth grade are going to go into high school and think of career possibilities that could eventually lead them to make decisions around future employment. And again, it goes back to this issue of access and information.
The access and information is interesting because that is a section kind of in the book for the original millennial that is actually can take a life of all its own. We think about either the access and information that we have in comparison to our parents' generation and even the generations prior to that, and how we utilize and use that information. Talk a little bit more about how you use the access that you have to grow your business, to scale, to really make an impact.
Yeah, I think at my company at Holberg Financial, what we're trying to do is look at the current system and the way access is given to financial information. And right now, if you go to a financial company, a lot of the times it's a unilateral conversation. And what I mean by that is you sit down across from somebody that holds the keys and they sort of say, give me your money and give me your situation and we'll figure out how to do it. And at the end of the day, you don't necessarily get that access to the information and it leaves you disempowered. And so at my company, the way that we're thinking about it is how do we actually educate people so that in the future, they don't necessarily have to stay with us, but they have the choice to stay with us. And it's a really radical inversion of the way that we've been processing companies and business. And a lot of people say like, well, if they're not going to be your customer in the future, why would you do that? And I think the real answer to that is we're trying to build their confidence and their self efficacy. And we're trying to say like, hey, at the end of the day, we're comfortable because you're successful, and that's potentially going to keep you around at the end of that. But I guess we're just more concerned with getting people access to information than we are about holding the keys away from people.
That's a really good point. I'm gonna go back a little bit and ask you to talk a little bit more about that generation of parents who you were working with. I think you said maybe ages 30 to 50. I thought it was interesting that you kind of cut your teeth in the industry, right? Working with people who were of a different generation. And even, as you said, still learning how to figure out what to do. I think we make the assumption that older generations just automatically know how to manage and know what to do. But we've seen, maybe our parents, our grandparents, aunt, uncle, relatives, etc., maybe struggle in some areas or maybe lose jobs and they didn't have enough saved. And, a lot of that pushed us to do the work that we're doing as original millennials. So can you speak a little bit more to what that was like and what type of experience and reflection that gave you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really fascinating point because one of the things that it allowed me to do was sort of glimpse into the future and see where we as original millennials might be in 10, 15 years. And so as I was working with a considerably older group of individuals, not only did I have to learn really quickly so that I could get them the best information, but in terms of like the challenge of working with an older generation, it was really fascinating because age really wasn't a barrier where I thought it was going to be, and ultimately what it came down to was sort of like this pressure to perform, not only for them to, use a shorter horizon moving towards retirement, but it was also a real big pressure for me, knowing that I only had a certain amount of time with them to help move them towards their goals. So ultimately, I think one thing that really helps ground me in that experience as I work with my clients now is, you don't want to wait to start to address a lot of these issues, whether it's career advancement or financial stability, or self-learning, whatever it is. I think that was one of my big learnings from that experience.
Mm-hmm. What challenges do you think you faced as a millennial in leadership?
Yeah, we're a generation that likes things now. Our news feed pops up in the morning, and we can get Snapchats immediately. Like, I think there's a pressure to solve really large issues immediately. I heard Jeffrey Canada speak. He started the children's or the Harlem Children's Zone in New York, and he said when he graduated, he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go fix education in Harlem in a couple years, and then I'm going to go on to the next thing." And this is from a man who's well into his 50s, and I think we put ourselves in that same pressure. So my challenge right now is to sort of battle the big picture of wanting to solve these systemic problems versus sort of the reality of the minutia, where it's like I still need to send that email, or I need to write this section of paper, or whatever it is. I need to create things now, and these finite little steps will build up to hopefully a big impact over the course of a lifetime. But keeping that perspective is a huge challenge.
That's a good point. And with us wanting the now, and not even so much, I like what you said. It's less about being able to attain things now for the original millennial. For us, it's more about being able to fix things now.
Yeah.
How quickly can we get to a sustainable solution where people can feel more comfortable in life, or feel more progressive in life, or feel more successful and accomplished, and be able to feel that they are, making progress and they're living with purpose. Talk a little bit more about how you merge profit and purpose.
Yeah, it's yeah, you're speaking to the idea of like impact versus like acquisition of assets, and I think it's a great point. It's something that I think our generation really cares about. But to answer that question, how do I merge the profit and the purpose? I mean, my company is it's a for profit, and so we want to make money. But I think the difference is there's three things. The first one is the recognition that we don't necessarily need to maximize profit in the traditional sense of like finding some type of price point that is as high as it can go. So, for example, my company's services, they're probably valued at $1,000 per year per person. Where we're merging purpose, though, is recognizing that we don't necessarily need to charge that much. And so we're going to be okay charging something more reasonable, say $500 a year. And so that's the first one. The second one is really trying to give back to the community. At my company, one thing that we have is expertise, and we also have time, and so we can give those back to nonprofits. So, for example, we spend a lot of time giving to the Center for Economic Progress in Illinois, and that is a nonprofit that does tax prep and financial coaching for low-income families, and we help contribute to over 18,000 families and individuals getting free tax prep in the course of the year. And these are vital resources that low-income families need, with the earned income tax credit, with high quality tax prep services. And oftentimes we're helping people avoid exploitation by other companies that don't necessarily have their best interests at heart. And then the third one is you really just have to be creative. And so it's like financial planning is generally pretty boring. And so I was thinking about ways to make it fun. And one of the ways I thought it would be fun is to get high schoolers to draw cartoon sort of hero style animations of my clients so that they have a tangible product. And what that does is, one, it makes your financial plan a little more exciting. But the other thing is you're engaging low-income, underrepresented youth, and you're engaging them in not only employment, but a productive activity, and you're starting to teach them about personal finances and business as well. And so it's sort of that juggling act between making money and doing good.
That's interesting, Joe, because I mean, this whole project, the original Millennial, I mean, to 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 feed into the stereotype that we're slackers or that we're entitled, specifically the one that we're entitled, and we're selfish as well, the one about us being selfish. You've just debunked all of that just now.
Well, I like to debunk things, so I hope that I'm doing that.
Yeah, I mean, just in everything that you mentioned, the value of your services in comparison to what you actually, charge or what your profit and your revenue looks like, uh, from the aspect of, being able to impact families and communities that may be underserved.
Mhm.
That just completely debunks the myths about of what people think about millennials. Switching gears a little bit, what do you think, or what element of culture do you think has impacted you most? I mean, millennials, we've become very influential, but we're also, in some ways, very impressionable. In some ways, not all the time. So what area or element of culture has impacted you or influenced you most?
Yeah, I think two things. Like, I think America is a great place to experience culture. And the first part about that is just like the richness and the beauty of the diversity that we have. Um, on top of that, the technology that we have allows us to experience a lot more of that almost constantly. And so, whereas we may not have really understood what was going on in the Bay Area in the 90s and the early 2000s, like, we get to see that now. We get to experience it. The same thing, um, in Chicago and all these big cities. We get to see these sort of social movements, and the culture happening real time. So I think that is really cool to leverage technology to view that culture. From the short list of prompts that you had, I identify with the food. The other day I went and had Indian food. Previously, earlier the week, I had deep dish pizza, and I also had Puerto Rican. I mean, we're hitting multiple continents all within a couple block radius. So food is a huge one for me. And then the final one that's sort of like timeless that I personally love, is just reading and literature, whether it's blogs or news articles or nonfiction books or fiction books. I think Winston Churchill said something really awesome. He said, "The further backward you look, the further forward you can see." And I think that directly relates to the cultural component and just sort of being like a lifelong learner and like really understanding what has happened, so that we all can move forward, and just create a more rich cultural atmosphere in our country.
That's awesome. I need to hang out with you. You're eating at some great spots.
Yes.
What,
Well,
what, wait,
Chicago.
remind me where you are.
Chicago.
That's right. That's right. So
Yeah.
yeah, next time I'm in Chicago, I'm looking to you to tell me where to go get the good food.
Hey, well, it's a great city, and I do love living there.
Good, 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 good. Talk about empowerment. Throughout, growing up, millennial, um, we've seen opportunities. We've seen how people work together from big partnerships with in business to like different things in the music industry. We've seen sports. We've seen people. We've seen how partnerships and empowerment can make a bigger impact. How important or why is empowerment essential amongst millennials?
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating question, and I actually think this is actually, quite different from. Thanks. Sorry.
No?
Um, Yeah. So this is very different from the previous generation. And what I want to point out is I think there's like two very basic sort of like formulas that we can look at. The previous generation was go to school, get a job, sort of get married and buy a house and live and be happy. And there's nothing inherently good or bad about that. That's just the way it was. But I think then there was a premium on stability and security. And I think our formula for the millennials has sort of undergone a paradigm shift. And I think our new equation is sort of like go to school and go pursue something that you value, and then go change it and go pursue another job that you value, and then change it again and change it again. And ultimately, it's like maybe I'll get married, maybe I'll buy a house. And in essence, we're leaving a lot of things up in the air as unknown variables, and that's totally okay. We just have a smaller or a lesser sense of stability and security, which I think is why we put a premium on empowerment. Because if we can be empowered, we can have the confidence to go pursue sort of that unknown and have that rapidity of change that you didn't necessarily see beforehand.
That is an awesome question, or awesome response, awesome answer. I agree with
Both
you.
of them, yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, great question. Great answer. Great question, or great answer for a great question. You're right, and it makes a lot of sense to be able to um, create, if you will. I heard a lot of that, and you're able
Hmm.
to be able to create and look at the formula and make the formula your own. I feel
Hmm.
like that's what really makes an original millennial who we are, is being able to develop a formula that works for you and still has impact. And I'll go right into my next question. What makes you, Joe, an original millennial?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is it's really, I know we get categorized by like an age group, but I think it's really about attitude. There's again, I'm going to reference a book, but there's this timeless Russian book. It's called Fathers and Sons, and it's sort of about these sons that are rebelling against their fathers, against the status quo, the yoke of oppression. And I think that's something you see constantly throughout the ages. But I think you hit on it earlier. The reason I think we're different and what makes me sort of an original millennial is we're trying to rebel through like creation. We're trying to build solutions to problems that we see. We're not trying to run away. We're not trying to sort of like diffuse the responsibility. We're saying like, what is my role in changing the things that I want to change? And for me, I mean, I'm always trying to like find the edge of the proverbial box, I suppose, and I'm trying to see if I can push out and stretch the limits of what's acceptable. And I think that's something that we're like as a generation, we embody that type of like expectation of breaking stuff. I mean, I love this one quote by the Dalai Lama. He said, "Know the rules well so you can effectively break them." And I think that's sort of like an ethos that we have. It's like we want to participate in everything that's going on, but we also want to break it so we can rebuild it and make it better. So I just keep this idea in my head that I've been thinking about it a lot this summer. It's this idea that you dream while you're awake. It's like I don't need to be asleep in this powerless state to dream. I want to be awake and thinking about my dreams, and I want to really bring those dreams and that future into existence and into reality. So I think that sort of captures why I'm an original millennial.
I love it. That's an awesome answer.
I
It's
thought hard on that one.
oh good. It reminds me of one of the quotes that I use. I can kind of operate on in business, and also I use whenever I do speaking engagements on this topic. It's the cliche that it's better to ask for permission than beg for forgiveness, and
I
I've
love that one.
operated in that for gosh since I first started my first business, and it that quote that cliche has never failed me. And I think that that one has lived in our generation, or we see it come to life in our generation more and more for the very reason that you just mentioned.
My manager at Google loved me and hated me because I operated with that truism. I got stuff done, but I gave her a lot of headaches. So
Yeah, yeah.
appreciate you dealing with me
And
for
she
that.
will always remember you as a result.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah. So last question, Joe. What song makes you an original millennial or defines you as an original millennial?
Well, it's new and it hasn't really been tested by time, but I would say Renegades by Ex Ambassadors.
Awesome. Good song. Well, thank you, Joe. Do you have anything else you want to share before we go?
No, I'm just excited to, like I said at the beginning, I'm excited to be part of this and, go into the empowerment. I think that we're doing stuff right now and we might as well keep going.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Definitely visit theoriginalmillennial.com. Follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. And just go to the website, theoriginalmillennial.com, and enter in your email address. You can subscribe to all the updates now. If you subscribe to all the updates, of course, you'll get an exclusive update for when you'll see this video coming out. If you're watching this video, then that means you probably got an email saying that we're featuring this superstar guy named Joe Holberg. So if you signed up, then you got the information. If you're not signed up, get signed up, because every time you sign up, you'll get all the updates as to who we're going to interview, who we're going to feature in the book, who we're going to put on a podcast. So make sure you're tuned in. I'm Ariel Ellis. Thank you.